You know, at this point in time, we'd like to take a break, and we're going to go to, in the sense we want any questions, because we're going to switch gears and get you into the 471 process. But the point of today's webinar was any last-minute 470 bidding questions, anything to do with the 470 process, because this is our last webinar before the February 26th deadline. So we don't want to switch gears until we've exhausted any questions. So we'll first take any chat questions, and then we'll open up to the phone bridge. And I really encourage you, when we do the phone bridge part, that you make sure you're on mute. And I'm going to take odds that we're going to have a good group and no one will accidentally not put it on mute. So here, we'll go ahead and open up and see if there's any chat questions before we move in and switch gears. First question, is it $150 per student per year? It's $150 per student pre-discount for the 5-year term. Hopefully, Farrah, that makes sense. If not, send it back in and I can. So another question we have, so if we put cabling as one of the services on the Form 470, we have to put out an ad. Well, let me clarify that. It's cabling in the example that we're talking about, it is Public Works, was a specific infrastructure, not a service, that was going to be installed. So because it's considered Public Works because of the type of work it is, then you would be, regardless of the dollar amount, you would need to put the ad in the newspaper twice in a 2-week period. However, when we talked about it on the one slide where we asked where it was a broadband Wi-Fi services, where the Wi-Fi was just a service, you're not involved with that part of the cabling in the general sense, meaning the cabling is going to take place to provide that to you as a service. It doesn't mean that your facilities doesn't need to be involved. There's firewall penetration issues. It just means you're asking for a service, not for a particular installation and product / cabling. So that's when it's on installation that you own the cabling infrastructure, and then it's Public Works that it needs to go in the newspaper twice in a 2-week period. Do eligible services include ISP services, internet? Yes, they do.
And the internet services are not subject to the phase down.
Yeah, very good point. Yes, you're going to continue to receive the same discount calculation that you have relative to the discount matrix for both data and internet access services. And the question is, what if you're applying for month-to-month services, do you still need bids?
If you're applying for month-to-month services, you still need to do your Form 470 to receive bids so that you can still select the most cost-effective provider. Whether you enter a contract or you continue with a month-to-month, that part of the bidding process remains the same.
The question was, do we have to reply to each bid email? And the answer on that is if it's a valid email. When in doubt, I would send a response. There is some web crawlers that once you post your Form 470 the next morning, lo and behold, you have a little extra email in your inbox. But I think you can tell there is still some generic information that when it's a valid email that they ask all of them. And don't be surprised if they didn't read your Form 470. So I've had that happen where we post the Form 470 and it's like, it's right in the Form 470. I think a lot of them have an automated system. It's a real valid email. It's just they ask you questions generically of all. You still need to respond. And it's appropriate for you to say, look, please see my Form 470 number X at this site and ask us if there's any further questions. You don't need to rehash what's on your Form 470 if it's obvious they haven't read it.
So do we have to decide on a bid before submitting the Form 471?
Whoa, okay, let's see here. No, absolutely not. And that's one point I want to make sure we make that really clear, is that you have to wait. Let's see here. We have to decide on a bid before submitting a 471. Okay, yeah, on that particular case, yes, you would have to figure out after you've waited the 28 days, and we're saying 29 days, you would have to go through the matrix that Rachel was describing earlier and evaluate all the bids and make sure that you do document that, and then you would put that into your 471. So that's the kind of generalized answer. And then when more specifically, if you have to decide on a bid before submitting it, yes, and you want to look at your board policy for that and make sure that you take it in front of your board if you need to. And I know this is kind of late in the game. You may have passed a board meeting, but if it's required, you need to work with your assistant superintendent to maybe have a emergency board meeting. But I don't know, maybe there's some other things that Rachel's experienced in this that some factors.
Actually, we're going to actually dive into this a little bit more when we get into the 471 section. So if you can hold on for that part of the presentation here in a few minutes, I think it'll help clear up any questions you might have.
Yeah, so, well, very good question, but I should have held off. So we'll keep going with any of the bidding ones. Okay. So I think the only thing we had here had to do with how do you certify your Form 470, and that will be something that once you hit submit, it gives you an option at the very end to go ahead and hit certify it. If this is the first year that your person that's signing it is new with your district, you'll want to do the paper certification and have them sign it and send it in. That'll prompt a USAC system to give you a PIN number. But if you already have one, you can certify it online with a PIN number. Okay, we're scanning here. Let's see. Is the $150 gross per student, and then you get deduct your eligible copay for a net reimbursement? Yes, I guess that's one way to look at it. Yeah, the $150 is gross. That's pre-discount. So in the case where you're at 85%, and remember that the max you can get on Category 2 now is 85%, then I think it comes out that you're actually going to have $128, if I remember the math on that, and then the difference will be paid by you, the applicant, in that particular case. So that would be $22. Okay, let me see here. In our RFP, we require potential bidders to initially reply via email only with their SPIN and FCC number. That knocks down the web crawler auto emails. Okay. Very good. Hey, any helpful hints is appreciated. You guys all have a lot of good experiences out there. Okay, Martha, for POTS lines with the phase-down discounts, will CTF still cover 50% of the non-E-rate counted discounted cost? Very good question. So that's a work in progress. Had opportunities to, I think on one of the last trainings, we were going to be going and meeting with Commissioner Peterman, myself, and some other stakeholders, meaning that we had Jared from the state libraries, we had Department of Ed had a representative there, and CSESA, and we had also another colleague or peer. So we explained to the commissioner what we would need in the K-12 community potentially for a 50% discount, what that would look like, and some compelling reasons why. And at that point in time, it was asked when will the decision be made if CTF will phase down, will CTF do 50% with no E-rate, or something in between. And all I have to say is that there was no particular time frame on the decision, and it's a work in progress. There was a definite good communication that any decision needs to be well communicated in advance because we already develop our budgets, especially with LCFF. It's been done for the next 3 years, was pointed out, as well as we specifically have our March deadlines for our budgets internally in our school districts, and I think libraries are probably fairly similar. So there was good communication. So I'm sorry, no specific answer yet, but once that decision is made, we'll make sure that it's made aware of to everyone. Does USAC automatically give you a PIN number after you submit your Form 470 in the mail? Good question. Yes, they do.
Yes, if you're a new signer to a form for a district, as soon as that wet signature is received by USAC, they will then generate a PIN and send to you. Sometimes it comes as quickly as 2 weeks, and sometimes it takes a little bit longer. So that being the case, be prepared to submit your Form 471 using paper, unless just in case you don't get your PIN in time for submitting the Form 471 online or certifying it online. My apologies.
Okay, we're going to open up the phone bridge, but please send in any question and answers as we do that. Okay, let's open up the phone bridge. Let's look at the chat, see if anyone sent, okay. Okay, we're going to open up the phone bridge, and again, I really encourage you, hopefully someone didn't walk away from their desk and leave it without being muted, so, or near a train. I've had that happen before. Someone was near a train and didn't realize they weren't on mute. Here we go. Okay, so please be on mute. We've unmuted everyone, so if you could do that on your end. Any questions, go ahead and blurt out.
I'm just texting you.
Any questions?
I think they're definitely on your team. She already booked the week in July. I know. I think we found.
Okay, we'll just wait another half a minute here, make sure there is anyone that doesn't have a question want to give us via the phone. And then we'll continue on with the last part of our webinar today. Okay, and then there'll be opportunities at the very end to ask any questions about anything. So appreciate that. So we'll put everyone back on mute so we can continue. We're less than an hour into it, so we did a speed E-rate. So basically, you guys got covered a summary of what we were doing in about 2 to maybe up to 4 hours. So hopefully you found this value of a refresher or some points here. And we will send out a survey at the end of the day, and I really encourage everyone to make sure that they fill that out, because we do have a few webinars left that are before the 471 window, and that'll help give us some specific feedback to how we can improve, and if there's specific subjects you want more of after today relative to the 471 process. Just give us another minute here. We'll finish muting up everyone, and then we'll get back online here, go through the 471, kind of set it up with some PowerPoint slides, and then after that, we'll go online.
Oh, wow. It wasn't like moving on the couch last night. It was already waiting. Okay, well, and that's why I'm sitting there and I'm listening.
Okay, we found the culprit. All right.
Okay, so let's take a look at the Form 471. We've mentioned in the past how much this form has changed this year. So what we're going to do is just kind of give you some highlights of things that you can be prepared for in helping you get through the form online. So let's just start off with what exactly is the Form 471. This is the form where you request your funding. You're going to request for specific services because you've already gone through your bidding process and you've selected providers. You're going to request specific dollar amounts. You have the bids to back this up. You have proposals. You have contracts. This is where you're going to get your specific dollar amount. It's also going to identify specific locations of who's receiving the service, or if it's Category 2, which site is it being applied to. It's also going to allow you to put in a specific time frame. Typically, the time frame is the funding year, which would be July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016. So the question we had earlier, do you have to have your bid selected prior to submitting your Form 471? Yes, it's a requirement, because otherwise you don't know who your service provider is, you don't know what the dollar amount is, you don't know any of the specific details that you must know in order to submit your Form 471. So at the conclusion of your bidding process, you must select specific providers and services. It's not an open grant where you say, I just simply want this money to spend it on wireless access points as we see fit. It's a program that you specify exactly who you're getting the service from and exactly what that dollar amount is. So when should you expect to file your Form 471? The biggest point is after your 28-day bidding process has completed, and that is associated with a Form 470. Now, you may not need to wait 28 days if you are in an existing multi-year contract. At that point, those services on that contract don't need to be rebid, assuming they were initially started in the E-rate bidding process when that contract was entered into. You would file your Form 471 after you sign contracts or select service providers, but it has to all be done before March 26th at 8:59 p.m. in Pacific Standard Time. Because of the changes to the Form 471, it takes so much longer to get through the form than it ever used to in the past. Please don't put yourself up against the wall thinking that on the last day of the window you'll be able to get all this done. So that means if you haven't filed your Form 470 yet, you're really narrowing your window of opportunity down. We just would hate to see anyone get in a position where they run out of time because the online form is so much more complicated than it used to be.
Extreme E-rate won't work this year, unfortunately. I remember, I think it was last year before, I was helping an applicant, and it was 8:30 at night on the day of the 471. She made it with 3 minutes to spare. I don't think that this year, with the issues that we've seen so far with the 471, it would be not a very good idea to wait till the last day. You do have to wait your 28 days, but you can remember that 28th day. You could do it at 12:01 in the morning, which I'm not telling you when to do it, but I have had colleagues across the nation state that they get up majorly early if they have to wait till last day. Remember, there's 3 hours difference, so our friends on the East Coast are 3 hours ahead. So if you start at 3 in the morning, it's 6 a.m. there. If you start at 5 in the morning, it's 8 a.m. there. So just putting that into context here. Hopefully no one's going to be in that position. I would hate to see that.
And one of the things that we'll highlight as we go into the online form, part of what's making this year so much more complicated is the online item 21 attachment. That's really what's creating the slowdown for doing the online forms. In the past, we could simply submit a copy of the contract or whatever hard copy item 21 you developed. That's not an option this year. Maybe down the road they might ask to see those hard copies, but in order to get your form submitted, you have to fill out stuff in the online template that you've never had to fill out before. So now we're going to get ready to go online. Some key things for you in helping you have the best experience online is, one, what is the best supported web browsers? We have listed here on the slide for the Form 471 helpful hints, Internet Explorer versions 9 and 10, the most recent versions of Firefox, Chrome, and Safari. So the online Form 471 works on all of those different versions of web browsers. It is suggested that you clear your browser's cache, cookies, and history before starting the form. And when you're looking at the form online, there are now blue chevrons at the top of the page that tell you where you're at. And here on this slide, we have an example of what those chevrons look like. If we were in this application, we would be in the discount calculation section of the form. Some other helpful hints. When completing the templates, and these are voluntary templates, you're not required to use them, but these are Excel templates for uploading information into the form. It is very important that you use a newer version of Excel. I believe it's Excel 97 and 2007.
Yeah, well, actually, there was an example of some that we had feedback that someone used an older version. I think it was 97, and they had issues. So use the newest Office version of Excel for that. The templates are on the USAC website, and we're going to show you this in a second in the upload. But you're going to be opening up with your version of Excel, so try to be the most recent version of Excel.
While you're on the form, on the online version, if you experience or receive any sort of error message, go ahead and save your document. We'll show you where the Save tab is. Exit the system, and then log back in. If you continue to experience the same error message, take a screenshot of it and get on the phone with the Client Service Bureau.
And that's really important factors. If you get into a real bad pickle with this, not being able to get through it, screenshots, send an email to submit a question, and call the Client Service Bureau. That way you have documented your issue and that you reached out and tried to get assistance before the window closed. Because
of the new system, some of the features aren't working fully yet, and one of those features is the print preview. Now, in the past, we could pull up the entire form and see it from beginning to end before we submit the form. As of today, that feature is not fully functioning, and they don't anticipate having that feature functioning prior to the close of the window. We'll all continue to keep our fingers crossed that it will get up and running, but in the meantime, we suggest that you do a screenshot of each screen, do a print screen, so that you can build your own Form 470 or 471 so you can take a look at it prior to hitting submit. Now, USAC has done a great job with releasing daily tips on how to navigate through this new online Form 471. And on this slide 31, we've provided the link to those daily tips. This actually takes you to the home page of USAC's website, and right in the center of the screen, down toward the bottom, is the link that says Daily Tips.
And one thing just to really emphasize on slide 31 is that to go out and come back in, you know, since the print preview, earlier when the 471 was first released, I was hearing about errors where data was put into the fields that they didn't put in, some kind of issue with that where it was copying from another part of one of the forms or screens. So I'm sure they've resolved that issue, but just encourage, like Rachel was saying, go back in and do print screens, and then you'll catch those. Because once you hit submit, that's going to be more challenging to correct it. If it's a clerical error and you hit submit, there is an opportunity, which we'll be talking about in further trainings, called the RAL. But I really encourage you to go back and check before you hit submit so that you don't have any whoops or last-minute issues.
So at this point, we're actually going to go online and build a Form 471. The first link that's provided on slide 32 is the training site. I want to make sure that that's very clearly identified by everyone, that it's a training site. Please don't inadvertently post your form there thinking that you've actually submitted a 471. It won't populate on the live database. The second link is to the live database, and the screenshot we have below is what the live database looks like right before you enter your form. You'll notice that under the Form 471, the button looks different than the rest of them. That is the new online portal, and you won't mistake when you get into that, the live version, that you don't have the words training site listed down on the right-hand screen. So I'll show you what things to look for just to make sure you're in the right format before you submit your form. But I do encourage you to use the training site as much as you like in order to get familiar with the form. It really does help you get through the process more quickly. Okay, so at this point, I'll just click on the link for the training site, and we'll get started. And as I clicked on the link, I'm not seeing what I thought I would see where it says training site on the side. So I'll show you how to get there using USAC's homepage. We're going to go, now we're looking at USAC's homepage. If we scroll down and look at the right side of the screen where it says quick links, the second one down says Schools and Libraries Program Training Site, now available. So click there. The first screen says that this is a training site. You'll notice on the right side of the screen in red letters it says SLD Training Site. And then we have the option that says I do want to enter the training site or I do not. For us today, we definitely want to enter the training site. And here we have it at the top. It says Training Site. Also on the right side of the screen again, SLD Training Site. So let's scroll down a little bit, and now we'll click on where it says FCC Form 471, and we'll start a new one. We'll wait for it to pull up.
We did get a report yesterday from other states that the 471 site was slow. So this is when we were talking about earlier, the sooner you can get started, the better. Just remember, you don't have to come in and fail swoop and get your complete 471 done. You can do it in steps and phases.
Okay, so here we have the first screen. I love that clock counter. If that doesn't make your heart rate go up a little bit, knowing how much time you have left to get this done. So click on the Start button right underneath where it says FCC Form 471, and we're going to start a new one. In order to do that, we first have to enter our build entity number. Once we get that number entered, we hit the Enter button next to it, and it tells us who we are. This happens to be for Butte County Office of Education. That is truly us. Notice underneath, it auto-populated our FCC registration number, and that's because the prior system already had that information available. If the FCC registration number does not auto-populate, there will be a link underneath this that allows you to go find your FCC registration number. We'll click Next. Now it's going to ask us a little bit about who we are, what kind of application is this. We are going to say that we're a school district because that best fits what Butte County Office of Education is, and that it's also for public students. Now it's very likely that some of you may have multiple type of entities. You could be a public with Head Start. You could be a charter and private. So you can select multiple options under recipients of service. The next question is, who is actually submitting this form? What's the email address? This is not the same as the contact person. This is a new field for us this year. What's valuable about this one is the person who's submitting the form is going to have the application number and security code emailed to them. So it's a great feature, and it actually does work. So we'll enter the person submitting the application. We'll click Next. Now we have that application number and security code. Again, this is being emailed to the person that we previously entered their email address. Now in the test system, that emailing of the security code and the application number does not work. So if you're playing around in the test system, please write this information down or do a screenshot so that you have it. Let's give a nickname to this form, and we'll just simply call it Voice. And click Next. Is a consultant assisting you? In our scenario, we say no. If you happen to say yes, then it will give you the fields needed in order to fill out the consultant information. Since we don't have a consultant, then who is our contact person? We'll enter that information. Our next question is, where is this contact person located? What's the address? Is it the same as the billed entity? In our scenario, we'll say yes. If you say no, you have the option to put in different contact information. Do you have a holiday or summer contact information?
I don't take those, so don't worry about it.
We encourage you to create a group email address, such as erate@bcoe.org, and have that on a distribution list so that multiple people get it. That makes sure that should you be on vacation, you have a hierarchy within your organization that says who's going to handle E-rate questions in your absence. It really does help speed up the processing of your application rather than having it put on the back burner because you were unavailable. Correspondence address, where should USAC mail the letter, such as a funding commitment decision letter? Whether it be the billed entity address or the contact address, if those happen to be two separate ones, it's nice to have that choice. In the past, we didn't. And the name of the person to receive the correspondence, we've only put one name in there, so obviously that would be Russ. Now on the next screen, we're going to select what category of service are we looking for. In the past, we used to encourage you don't mix priority 1 and priority 2 on the same application. Our new system with category 1 and category 2 does not allow us to mix those two. So be certain that whichever one you select is the one you're really trying to apply for here, because once you go past this screen, you can't change it. In our example, we said this is a voice application, so it's category 1. We selected category 1 and continue on to the next screen. The next screen, we're now looking at the discount calculation. This is where we're going to take advantage of the template that we had prepared ahead of time. Now, showing you where that template is, I'll pull it open. So that you can see what it looks like prior to creating our Form 471. Here we have our discount template. It starts off in column A where you're entering your district's billed entity number. This is the umbrella that covers all of your school sites. What entity number is that? And going across the screen, we see all the different entity numbers that are associated with our application. If you need specific instructions, USAC has provided guidance on each field so that you can know what is required in each category, in each field. Now this is also something, there's a specific template for schools and for libraries. All of this can be accessed from the SLD's website. If you go and look under forms, then it'll give you access to all of the templates that are available. So now that you've seen what this template looks like, we'll go through the process of uploading it. Going back to our screenshot, we're going to click on Import/Copy. Now you can copy it, the information, if you already had a 470 that's already been created and you already have your entities in there. But we haven't done that yet, so we're going to upload our entities. And at this point, if you don't already have a template, it gives you the link to download it. We're going to go to our documents where we've got it saved. We have it uploaded, and we can verify that we selected the right one and click the button Import. As you can see, this template, the templates that are provided, they can save time. However, a lot of time goes into populating those templates. It saves time, but it's still work. So now our template's been uploaded. How do we know what's in that template now? Did it take? If you click on the link where it identifies your entity, it's going to show you everything that was in that template that you just inputted. Now if we scroll down a little ways, again, it's allowing us to verify that our information is correct. Let's suppose you had one entity where it didn't give you an urban or rural status. It only gave you a question mark because it couldn't determine it. At that point, you go back up to the top screen, select that row, and then come and click on the little pencil-like button that says Edit. Then you can make changes manually to any information that may have come across incorrect, or like on the urban rural, because that's populated within the system. If it doesn't populate, you can select one or the other. Scroll down to the bottom of the screen and it tells us that we're at a 90% discount. If that doesn't give you a number there where it says the discount rate, it would instead give you a button that says recalculate. Once you click that button, it will recalculate and give you what your discount percentage is. So now let's go to the next screen. And notice it tells us there's something missing. It says that our number of students is missing in a couple of our, in one of our sites. Now this is something that we wanted to highlight to you. On the tip screen that the SLD has provided, if you happen to have an instructional facility that does not have enrollment, do not enter a 0 on the template. Go back into the form manually, like we'll do here, and adjust the enrollment to say 0, but do not enter it in the template. To adjust that enrollment, you can see here, we just simply click on the line item, and it gives us that opportunity to enter the information.
And you're not going to be putting 0.
Not typically. There can be instructional sites that have a 0 reported enrollment, yet it's still an instructional site. What you have to know about that is if you have a 0 enrollment at an instructional site, you don't have a Category 2 budget because your budget's based off your enrollment. So although there are a few scenarios where you could legitimately enter 0, just know what the whole picture looks like in the end with your Category 2. On this very last one, notice it doesn't have urban or rural. It does not allow me to click into the enrollment area. That's because that's a non-instructional facility. So the system is getting smarter and giving you only options where you are allowed to fill in information. So now we'll notice that button I mentioned to you earlier. It says Save and Recalculate at the bottom in order to get your discount rate. We'll click that button. We're still at a 90% discount. Now let's click Next. Now we come to another new part of the form, which is the connectivity survey. The SLD, USAC, FCC is trying to get their hands or their head wrapped around the state of the nation's networks in their schools and libraries. So we'll need to fill out this information that's true to your site. Now on this lower half, if all of your sites fall into, say, one category, you still have to actually enter in information in each field, even if it's just zeros. Okay, so we've made it through the first part of the form, and that in itself wasn't too scary. The fun part really comes into creating your funding request. We're going to click on the button now that says Everything on One Page. This is very, very different than the old form. So we start off with a nickname for this funding request, and we're going to call it our voice services. Is it a duplicate funding request? No. A duplicate funding request would mean that it's exactly the same as one from a prior year that you have not received a funding decision on yet. When it comes to Category 1 services, you don't typically have duplicates that way. That typically applies more to a Category 2 service. So now, what is the service type for the product and services that you're requesting? Pick one. We have voice services, telecommunications, or internet access. Please note the difference between voice services and telecommunications is voice is just what it says, voice only. Telecommunications is your high-speed data lines. You will not find your high-speed data line options within the voice services, nor will you find it the other way around with voice service options within the telecommunications button. So our next question is, what was the establishing Form 470? You want to say yes, that one was posted, and then enter that number. And if I entered it correctly, it'll pop up California Department of Technology Services. That's the red flag right there that this must be the CalNet 3 contract.
Or if you put the wrong Form 470 number, it'll say District or Library XYZ. It's not you.
That's very true. The next field asks for our service provider information. Some of you have this memorized.
That's the good old Pac Bell.
Pacific Bell. And our build account number. You can enter exactly all of your build account numbers here if you wish to. For the sake of time, I won't do that. Now, is this a contract? We're saying yes, it is. Your other options are month-to-month or tariff. The service dates. What date was your contract awarded? What date does the contract expire? So all of this information you can't get unless you've entered into an agreement with a service provider. And then when will the services start? And now remember that this application refers specifically to funding year 2018, or funding year 18, which is July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2016. So the first date for services within that time frame, July 1st. Our next question is, does your contract have voluntary extensions? The CalNet 3 contract does have voluntary extensions. Now, how many extensions are left on that contract? We have 2. So what is the total remaining length of the contract if you exercised all extensions in months? So we'd have to figure that out ahead of time in order to have that answer. Is the funding recovered under a state master contract? This particular one is. It was bid by the state of California and as noted on the Form 470 that we selected. Is it a continuation from a previous funding year that was based on a multi-year contract? Yes, it is a continuation, and we'll enter that 470 number, that funding request number if you happen to have it available. Now, it's interesting, the next area, it says the narrative, provide a brief explanation of the products and services you're requesting. As we get through the form, you'll see where this can be a very useful section because we're going to have to make some things fit into sections that they don't necessarily fit perfectly. Providing a narrative gives your PIA reviewer additional information so that they can be helpful in completing the review of your form faster. It will help them in creating the questions that they need to ask you. The next question, pricing confidentiality. This is also new. This is part of the new transparent E-rate that we're all looking forward to. Is there a statute, rule, or other restriction which prohibits the publication of the pricing information? And a lot of service providers may say, hey, we don't want our pricing to be public. We're giving you a special deal. The bottom line is just by simply participating in the E-rate program, their pricing has to be public. It is public because they return a bid to you on your E-rate bidding process. So is there a statute? No, there's not. This pricing needs to be made public so that everyone can see, we can all see what the other's paying for the same services. Our next button is to click Save. We have now had our first funding request created.
Yay.
But did you happen to notice we haven't said anything about pricing yet? What is our monthly cost? Is there any one-time fees? Now here's the button that says enter products and services for this funding request. Here's where your template comes in hand. We're going to click now on the link that says upload completed template. And it gives you again the option to download the category 1 template because that's what kind of form we're using. Let's go to browse, item 21 template, upload. So keep in mind that you're going to end up having a separate template for every funding request that you need. Now within that template you can have multiple services. Here's part of the issues that we've been finding with the online program. Sorry, I stopped myself on an earlier comment I was making because we had an error come up on our application. It says that within our template there was a problem. Digital transmission services with DS1 is an invalid combination of service and connection types. So let's go look at our template and see what it might happen to be talking about. What's interesting to note here is a lot of these templates have drop-down menus where you can only select what they give you. We said digital transmission services. So here's where you have to keep in mind the difference. A digital transmission service is not subject to the phase down. So having it listed on this particular item 21 attachment is going to slow down the process, and that's very likely why that error message came up. So if you look at your CalNet 3 bill and you have T1 lines on that bill as well as voice lines, you may very likely end up having to have 2 different funding request numbers in order to accomplish getting yourself funded. So let's see if we can change this service to be only voice. And then move on with our application. Some of the things you'll also notice is I'm entering a voice service now. I'm required to enter some of these fields that may not make any sense. For example, bandwidth upload speeds on voice. It doesn't necessarily apply, but you have to put something in there in order to move forward. Okay. Now we'll save our template again.
And one just side note on this, if you have a technology person, maybe when you go through filling out the template for the first time and you're not, that's not your area of expertise, I'd probably encourage you to have your IT person work with you, because a lot of these are coming from an IT background. These are pretty normal questions, and they can help you kind of go through this very quickly. Even if they don't understand E-rate, they can say, well, that doesn't make sense, and then you don't have bandwidth or speed on voice, so that would be a suggestion.
So we're going to try browsing and uploading this template. Now remember, these templates are optional. You can fill in this information manually on each screen. And for some districts, if you're a smaller district, manually may make perfect sense. If you're a larger district, getting accustomed to the templates and knowing what error messages you could come across because you played around with it is going to be your best bet. So now we have uploaded the 2 line items that we entered in our template, and it does have all of the information entered in here. Unfortunately, we're still not quite done. We have to tell the system who's receiving these services. So the button underneath says Manage Recipients. We'll click that, and then we have the option. We can simply add all if that happens to be the case, or if it's for, like we talked about earlier, digital transmission services, then you may have to go in and say, well, this particular line item only applies to this school site. And that's something that, again, getting to know your templates and the system will help you in figuring out what's going to be the best option for you. We'll add all on this first one. It says, is every entity on this application receiving products for this line item? We say yes and close. And it then shows us all of our entities listed. On the next one, underneath it, for voice service, we click Manage Recipients, and we say that it's only the admin facility. We just click on that button, on that link, and it populates the next side of the screen for us. And now remember, when I'm doing this, I have to shrink my screen a little bit. I apologize for this, but in order for it to show us all, click Close. And now we have our second line item where it's only being applied to a specific location. So now if we click Next, we have our first funding request that is completed. If we don't have anything else to do, which is not likely, most of us have multiple funding requests, then we can click Next and go to our certification screen. Remember that the certification screen is basically saying that you have complied with all the rules and regulations. If you've never seen this screen before, please go ahead and read through it once. It's the same on every application, so once you read it the first time, you don't have to continue to read it every single time. A few areas to keep a close eye out for. I'll make my screen larger again so you can see this better. Notice under item E, it says check this box if you're receiving any of the funds in item E directly from a service provider listed on any Form 471 filed by you. You do not want to check that box. You do not want to be in a position where you're receiving funds from a service provider.
That's like a trick question.
It is. So just a heads up on that, the scenarios where that would truly apply are so incredibly slim. If you think you're in a position where that would apply, please get on the phone with Russ so you can discuss it in detail. But like I said, the scenarios where that would truly apply are so incredibly slim that it's not likely that it would apply. That brings us to the end of our form. Once we've selected all of our certifications, which you don't have the option not to select them, you come down to the bottom where you're going to fill out, submit, and certify your form. And it basically just walks you through the process. This takes us to the end of this part of the presentation. Again, as you've seen, it takes us a little bit longer to get through this, especially since we have the templates prepared ahead of time. the template that I prepared for this took me a good, I'd say between 20 and 30 minutes to collect all of that information because it comes from a variety of sources. If you're a large district, please spend the time on your templates. It does save time within the system, within the online 471. Smaller districts, like I mentioned before, may not be quite as advantageous for you. At this point, we'll go see if we have any questions. Okay, so for every bid you receive, do we have to specifically tell the discount provider, yes, we accept, or no, we do not in the email? That, whether or not, how you communicate with your bidders is up to you. It is a good idea to notify the bidders if they did or did not receive the award. Obviously, if they did receive the award, then you're going to be signing either contracts with them or acknowledging to them that you have awarded to them. But for the ones that did not receive the award, it is a good idea to communicate with them that they did not.
There's no specific E-rate FCC rules in that area. So, and one thing that I would encourage you to, definitely after you've figured out who you're awarding the bid, to interact with them. But I would wait to tell the others unless you have extra time, and because you need to get your 471 done, because you could get into a lot of questions with the ones that didn't win it once you notify them. So I would make the selection, do all the official processes, complete your 471, and then as a professional courtesy, do reach out to those that provided you bids and tell them that they didn't receive it.
Okay, the next one's a good question. Is the Excel template available for download in advance of filing the 471? If so, where? Well, let's go and I'll show you where that is right now. Let's go to USAC's website. And that's usac.org/SL. To get to the templates, on the left side of the screen where it says Forms underneath Resource and Tools, click there, scroll down a little ways. You have the Form 471, and you have right there FCC Form 471 optional templates. Once you click on that link, now you have all of the templates that apply to the Form 471. There's a discount calculation template for schools, there's one for libraries, and there's 4 different templates for the Item 21 attachment.
Good question. And yes, definitely use the key to templates, and those that aren't familiar with technology and uploads, the key to the templates is to use the pull-down menus, and don't get creative with your own text in the areas where there's pull-down menus. When it specifically has a pull-down menu, you must use one of those options. Otherwise, when it uploads, there'll be errors, and you'll be wondering what's going on. You'll get an error message like what Rachel had, and it might be sometimes a little bit challenging to figure it out.
Now we have a comment that's highlighting a nuance of specifically the CalNet 3 contract. CalNet 3 contract, some of the services have different expiration dates than other services. So given that fact, you'd have to divide out your services from the CalNet 3 contract onto different funding request numbers based on expiration date, and sometimes within the system based on what the service is, whether it's being phased out or whether it's not being phased out. So that was a great bit of information there. That's something to keep in mind no matter what contract you're working with. If there are variances within the contract, it may require different funding request numbers to cover each variance.
Just some more specific examples, and what we were talking about is you're uploading, you would want to create a separate template for your voice services, because remember, those are phasing down, so they're going to be a different discount. You want a different template for your T1s if you have those, especially because they may be on CalNet 3. And you'd want a different template for your broadband. Let's say you have 100 megs to a gig to 10 gigs. Those could be 3 different templates that would be uploaded into 3 different funding requests that we were just showing you earlier. And again, the contract expirations could be different or the same for all of them. But in this particular example, the reason why we were suggesting 3 different templates, they were different services. One was being phased down. The other 2 would get your normal calculated discount.
We have a question. Can we download a blank copy of all the forms? Yes, you can. We'll go back to the USAC's website, click on Forms again, and scroll down to just a little ways. We have the Form 471. You can download a PDF copy of it, along with the Form 471 instructions. also, I'm sorry, the 470 instructions. We also have the same options for the 471 and the 471 instructions. It's interesting to notice the difference you'll see between the 470 and the 471 because the 470 is still based off the old system. So the PDF copy looks very much like what you would see online when you fill out your 470. 471, on the other hand, is a completely new system, so the PDF copy does not necessarily resemble any part of the new online Form 471, but the information it contains is still the same. Question, why does the system ask if a 470 was posted? Is there a situation where no 470 is required? You know, that's a good question because honestly, if you say that one wasn't posted, you can't go anywhere else in the system. You can't move forward. So
the programmers weren't users of E-rate. They were programmers.
What part of the 471 process utilizes Excel uploads? As we demonstrated a moment ago, that part would be the discount calculation part as well as the item 21 template part. That's the only two areas that utilizes the Excel uploads. The rest of it has to be manually entered.
So one is your free reduced lunch by site, and the other is the actual item 21 information.
So what exactly causes the 471 process to be longer? The way the data is now entered into the system causes it to be longer, and the fact that there is the required online item 21. It's required. It was never required in the past to be online, but it's basically because they set the parameters, everything has to fit within their parameters, and it doesn't always make sense, so it will cause you to do a little bit of trial and error.
Plus, it's a web window base, and you can see as we're popping things up, moving through it, where the old system was more like an electronic form, meaning you popped in the information, you went to the next screen. So one of the positives of the old way is that it was easier to go through quickly, but one of the negatives is that it didn't check for errors. So that's another thing. It's going to check for errors, not all errors, but it'll check for some, and that'll slow you down. The Windows aspect of it as well as the information collecting and the error checking. Any more questions? We're looking for some. If for some reason when we were addressing them, because we just kind of went through the question and answer, please feel free to re-ask the question.
Says, can you go back and show the narrative description section of the FRN? So this will give us an opportunity to play around with the chevrons at the top of the screen. Before I go anywhere, here I want to show you how to save in case it hasn't saved. But it tells us that it was last saved at 12:01 p.m. We're going to click that button and ask it to save again. Let's see if it'll let us go back. Aha, there we go. We just clicked on funding request. It let us go back because I was in a screen and I hadn't finished filling out some of the information, so it wasn't going to let me save. So we just simply back out of that screen and then have it save for us.
Yeah, and I can't emphasize enough that you make sure you click the save when you're doing those types of things. Just kind of like treat it as a Word document or Excel sheet.
Okay, so we're looking for the narrative part of the funding request. You're gonna test my knowledge with this system yet. So I just clicked on key information, and we see what that gives us. Goes down to the services date. And there's our narrative. It's under the key information section where you can enter in additional information on that particular Form 470 or funding request number. Obviously, I didn't enter anything in there, but you are welcome to use that to your advantage.
And, you know, they're really, since this is the first year of them asking that, it's hard to know what a best practice might be. Just a 10,000-foot level, just remember any information you put on your 471, if they have questions, they're obliged to ask those questions. And so I'm not sure if there's any specific things at this point in time that we've seen that would help your application processing. But go ahead and look at the question in terms of they have on their forms of what they're looking for in that field. But again, if it doesn't apply to you, you're not required to put anything specifically in the narrative field.
The question is, what if you don't have a free and reduced lunch because you're a small private school and only offer tuition discounts, not lunch discounts? That's a very good question. The way the E-rate program works is regardless of whether you participate in the free and reduced lunch program, that is the basis for establishing your discount. So if you don't participate in that program, then what you would want to do is send out surveys to the parents of your students so that you can then use that same criteria to establish which one of those students or how many of your students qualify for the free and reduced lunch program. Obviously, that does not obligate you to participate in that program, but it's that qualification matrix that determines what your discount percentage is going to be.
Eligibility is the key word, which is based upon the income. And I think in particular, your case, I know I've talked to Farah, you're later in the game. You just remember that the minimum discount that you would get if that's something that you can't feel comfortable doing in the time fashion is a 20% discount. But if you have time and you can collect that, so.
Okay. As if you have a multi-year contract from previous years for web hosting, is that no longer funded this year, or is it grandfathered in based on multi-year contract? Web hosting is flash cut. That means that it doesn't matter how long your contract was from a previous bidding cycle, it is no longer eligible for E-rate discount at all. Now, if you need more information, going back to the issue of surveys, if you need more information on how to manage a survey, going to the USAC's website, there's some guidance there on what your survey should look like and what information it should include. Remembering that the state of California and the libraries does not have any administrative authority over this program. There's no one that offers a standard survey form.
So definitely use the, I guess, suggested survey on the USAC website, because it is a federal program, and then they give you a suggested sample.
What is the major difference on the 471 discount for public libraries versus schools? The major difference, schools function as far as getting their discount based on their enrollment for their school sites. Libraries function based on wherever that library's branch is located, whatever school district that branch is located in, it would use that school district's discount, that school district's enrollment and total number of students that qualify for the NSLP program.
And remember, libraries, we're going to put them in bucket. This example that Rachel's giving is on an independent branch library, not part of a consortium, not part of I guess, accumulation of libraries. I think they call them consortiums, and then there's also regional library. So if you're a standalone library branch, it would be where that library branch is at in terms of which districts for reduced lunch information.
And also if you're part of a system and you have your main branch and then you have outlets that are located elsewhere, it's where your branch is located, it's that school district that you would use.
Meaning your head branch, not the outlying libraries, but your head, what do you call it, your main branch office, your corporate address, whatever you want to call it, the main office, whatever district that's associated or is physically in is the district of free reduced lunch information you use.
Very good questions.
Yeah, you guys are doing great. These are all questions we've had along the way, and we've been part of reading and researching them.